autumn sun is streaming into the office here in York, I want to make a confession. I am pretty bonkers about conkers. Welcome to another episode of Coming to Your Senses. And I genuinely am. I'm sat here. For those of you who are watching on video, you can see I have a whole bag of horse chestnuts, commonly known as conkers. If you can't, then you can. If you're not watching this, then you'll just be hearing the noise of them. It seems like a random thing, doesn't it? And coming to your senses to be talking about conkers and just how bonkers I really have become about them. But I have. And this has only happened in the last year and a half. Maybe two and a half years actually in the grand scheme of things, but specifically about conkers in the last year and a half. So what has changed for me is that one of the things that got triggered for me during the pandemic was foraging and looking at what is actually available to us pretty much on our doorsteps, no matter where you live. I live in the city of York, and yet even being in a city, we can find things around us. And what the time of lockdown provided for me, and I know many others, was the opportunity to start to look at what is actually available around. And I began to listen to people, follow people on social media when it was appropriate, started going to events. And I am by no stretch of the imagination a foraging expert. I know a handful of things and I probably know two handfuls of things, and I use about a handful of what I have learnt and keep developing and adding to it every single year. And this time of year, autumn, when September comes along, what used to happen when I was a kid is we would go and find these horse chestnut, these conkers, and we'd be allowed to drill a hole in them, pickle them in vinegar or bake them in the oven, was what many people did as well. And then we'd put a piece of string through them, and then two people would go into competition and you'd play conkers. As I understand it, I believe that's been banned in school these days, as many health and safety things kind of take over. But what I did not know about conkers for all of those years is that the horse chestnut tree has a chemical, an enzyme with it called saponin. And if you're out and about and any time of year and you get dirt on your hands or they get a bit mucky and you haven't got any way of cleaning them, if a horse chestnut tree is nearby, you can take some of the leaves off and even just use your own saliva to lubricate it, or water, crush it down into your hand, and you'll start to get this like gloopy, soapy consistency thing on your hand, and the saponin will come out and will clean your hand. Yes, it's not, you've then got to be able to wash off the kind of soap really that it produces. But it also goes into these conkers. And the reason I've become bonkers about conkers is because about 18 months ago, I think it was, I discovered that you could use them to create your own laundry detergent. So I did, and then you can freeze them as well. So I gathered a few, had a go, put a little bit of essential oil in it, and realized that, my gosh, this really does work. And unfortunately, by about, I think it was about February, March time, I'd run out of conkers, so had to revert back to everyday, the detergent that I use. But this year I'm doing an experiment, and that is why I've gone bonkers for conkers, because I have got, so this bag that I have got with has got about, I think 12, 15 conkers in, and I have 10 of these. No, I don't. I do have 10 of these. That's right. In my freezer at home. And they hopefully, one bag will create a litres worth of laundry detergent. So I have frozen them so that I have got a bag of laundry detergent basically frozen for each month, to see if I can get it to last the whole year. And then if I do, then that'll give me an opportunity to keep doing that every single year. Now, why on Coming to Your Senses am I talking about conkers? Because what foraging has taught me to do, and even conkers is it's given me the opportunity to really see what's available to us and the abundance that is there. So I may have collected somewhere between 100 and 150 conkers in order to be able to provide laundry detergent for me, a household of one, plus verbal, um, a dog, if that doesn't make sense to you. Um, but that's literally not even it's a small fraction from one horse chestnut tree. And I know on just one of the dog's walks that I go on, I passed at least seven. So, there's a number of households that could support throughout the year. If you've listened to the first episode of Coming to Your Senses, you'll know that in the early 2000s, I experienced a breakdown. I tried different therapies, but it was coaching that truly helped me transform my life. Initially, when I discovered coaching, though, I couldn't afford it. And it was a kind soul who sponsored me not only to have coaching, but also to train and become a coach. And my promise to them was that I would pay it forward. And I've done that in many ways over the years, initially through social media and private Facebook group called Confidence Revolution, and also through Coming to Your Senses, the podcast. But it triggered for me a passion to really want to make and create a secure, supportive space for people to be able to come together and have conversations that transform their lives. So I created the Conscious Conversations community. It's a group where we meet on more than once a month, and we have a focused theme which is guided by the community and facilitated by me. There's hundreds of hours of learning and resources and materials to help you transform your life in a like-minded space. Because I get passionate about it and because this was my promise to pay it forward, I'm offering you the opportunity to trial it for £1 for the first month. If that appeals to you, then head to juleswyman.online/conscious conversations offer. juleswyman.online/conscious conversations offer to explore what's available for you through being part of a conscious community. When I first started foraging, and you sort of learn the basics, little bits about nettles and gorseweed and dandelions, even the stuff that we have become fairly common in the UK that we know, and some of them get referred to or referred as weeds. But actually, there's so much richness there, and they are in abundance. And that's what I've started to notice, is the more that I've noticed the abundance of what nature provides. Even my freezer currently is also, as well as conkers, is filled with elderberries, for example. And I've now got into the habit of making an elderberry elixir that I then take a small shot of that every morning to help boost my immune system throughout the winter months. And even that I haven't even taken a fraction off of one elderberry bush. And that there was just tons of it this year that could support many, many families. And the abundance that is there in our lives, not just in nature, but in the everyday, I think it's very easy to miss. It's very easy to get distracted. And I think that if you listen to example to the news it can seem like everything is going wrong, it's all doom and gloom, the world is falling apart, everything's awful, yada yada yada. And don't get me wrong, there is some heinous stuff going on in the world, there is some really big uncomfortable stuff happening in the world, and there's also a great deal of goodness. There's also a great deal of magical, amazing, wonderful things that are happening. But if we only look for, or are only guided to see what's going wrong, we're not going to see what's going right. And let's bring that down from the world and start to look at it in your own life. What I know as a coach is that very often clients will come in, and especially in the first few sessions, we'll talk about lack. We'll talk about what's missing. We'll talk about what they don't have and how they would long for life to be different. And actually, very often we forget and don't see what we do have. I used to run a workshop years ago called Have It All. And 99.9% of the time, delegates would get to the end of the workshop, and when we'd go around and ask, what have you gained from the session? What are you taking away? And how are you going to implement it? Exactly, etc. 99.9% of the time, people would say, I've got what I didn't, what I came here looking for, I've realized I've got. But we've been so conditioned in to look for what's missing. We've been so conditioned in to look for lack that we forget to see, we forget to actively look for what's there. It's very easy when something is going awry or we've been thrown a curveball to start to look for what we don't have. But look at all the evidence of the times where you have had things, or things have gone before, but then something else has come in its place. We need to start to actively recognize and look for those things. And I'm not talking in a Pollyanna, everything's all rosy and shiny way. I mean, actually look for what is there. Really look for what it is that you do have. At the end of the day, as I've said, I think on other episodes, if you are at least listening to this podcast, then you are in a very small minority of people within the world, because therefore you've got access, whether it's via your phone or a device of any other description, to be able to listen to this information. You've got the ability to be able to share this. You've got the ability to be able to follow it, to make sure that you keep gaining information like this, which many in the world don't. And the great thing about that is that means that you can then look at what you do have in order to be able to support and help other people as well, if that is something that you would like to do. Now, the reason I get so passionate about this conversation, one, because it was inspired by nature, and genuinely, when I initially started to look into foraging, I didn't expect it to have the impact of me recognizing the abundance of what is there and how much is there for us. Even now, I've done it for 18 months, seeing it through every single season, it would be very easy to think, oh, well, we have it there in maybe from sort of like late spring through to late autumn, but we don't have anything during winter. But something I've noticed is there is a lot of things that are there. It's like this wonderful, some things are more in abundance in some seasons and some are more abundant in other seasons, and winter still has things there that are edible, that are viable for us to help us in our everyday. Obviously, don't just pick anything and consume it. Please make sure that you look up and get clarification of what it is, because obviously there are things out there in the natural world that we are not meant to eat. So please make sure that you check first. But I was looking to foraging to just start learning about what plants could be helping from a medicinal perspective as well as a health perspective. And unbeknownst to me, that's why I'm so bonkers about conkers, is also with cleaning, and how they can help in that sense. So when I started to realize the amount of abundance that was in nature, unconsciously, I started to see it in my everyday of what it is that I do have. Now, ironically, what that's then led to is me going, well, I don't need as much as I thought. So because capitalism and commercialism talks about lack, that's what it functions on. You don't have this and you need it. Do you know that you need it? You're missing this, therefore you need that. It's kind of this perpetual message. But what I'd realized is I'd been hypnotized by that message. And whether it was a new outfit or whether it was a new app or whether it was a new product or book or whatever, is that quite often I was caught up in the buying it because I thought that was going to fill a hole. But if we've constantly got this message of not enough and lack, then really and truly that hole is never going to be filled. And the more I've embraced abundance, or not even embraced it, actually, that's not the accurate way. The more I've just genuinely seen it, the more I've realized how much I don't need. There's all this extra stuff that I thought was going to help me feel enough, that now I can see I don't need. And I think in this year of 2024, I haven't kept count of how many bags of things that I've either sold or gone to charity. But this, I always have a book clear out every year. And this year was definitely the biggest. I think it was about 30 to 40 books that I just handed on to somebody else or gave to charity, because why am I holding on to them? Is it just this status symbol to have them on a bookshelf to go, oh, look at me, I've read that? Rather than stopping and going, well, that could be of service to somebody else rather than it being on my bookshelf. And I've done that with so many other things. That's why I'm bonkers about conkers, because there's so much that we do have. There's so much that is available to us. Now, I appreciate you may be listening in to this in another country, where horse chestnuts may not be prevalent, but go and do a bit of investigation around foraging wherever you are, because you'll then start to spot stuff. You become attuned to it. I've got a friend who knows way more about gardening and foraging than I do. And we can be on a walk and she will spot something way up on a tree that I didn't even notice was there. Another thing that I've noticed that has obviously been there all my life, but I've never ever noticed it before, is fungi. And all the many thousands of varieties. Now, I know so little about being able to identify different fungi. I kind of know one that I know what it is, which is turkey tail. Um, but other than that, I don't know them well enough, so I don't pick them at all. But I love spotting them and the many, many varieties that there are and where they grow and what they look like. It's quite astounding. But we can miss these things if we're not looking for them. If we're not looking for what is there, then we're only going to see what isn't. If we're not looking to what's available, we're going to get caught in a fairly victim mindset of what's missing and what I don't have and why that's not enough and therefore why I don't feel fulfilled, or whatever the word is that we might be using. I genuinely did not expect foraging to unlock this perception. And it really is such a perception shift. I can't emphasize it enough, of how abundant life genuinely seems to be now. And it always was. I just hadn't seen it. I notice people in a different way now. People seem more smiley. They want to make more eye contact. And that's possibly because I've got my head up and because I'm smiling more, because I'm making eye contact more, that I'm seeing it. And that's my invitation, because that's a difference. That's something that enables me to, if thinking gets caught up in a perception of lack, and especially as we're heading into winter in the UK, I'm not a fan of the short days. I'm not a fan of the darkness. Not the band, although I'm not a fan of those either massively. And they've done a few good tracks, but I digress. But the more I can see what it is that provides, even that's a perception shift. And a perception shift in one thing, just by seeing that I don't have to buy chemical laden laundry detergent now. I can just blend up. And if you want to know how to do it, by the way, you just get these conkers, you blend them up or you cut them really, really small, put them in a big container, pour about 1 litre worth of hot water, boiling water over them, leave them for anywhere between an hour and overnight. I usually might leave mine overnight. Strain it off, and then if you can, blend up the pulp of that and do the same thing again. Add some more water on and then sieve that out. Get rid of the pulp that's left onto your compost heap, hopefully. Once it's cooled down, add any essential oil that you want to, and then bingo, you have laundry detergent. That's a shift. That's a perception shift that has completely had a side effects that I wouldn't have imagined. The joy of seeing conkers now, the joy at this time of year of collecting them, the joy of going for an experiment. Let me see how many I need. I'm going to collect, it's somewhere between 120 and 150 that I've collected. I froze them last year. I tested that part, so I know that that works. And let's see how far through the year I get, because I know I only have to go to about September next year when they start falling from the trees again, and I can do the same thing if it works. That's just one aspect of my life that's changed through doing this. I'm really curious as to what all of this could bring for you by opening up your senses to what nature has to offer, how you could bring that into your world safely, checking what's available, checking what's appropriate. And if you have used things, maybe you're a foraging expert, maybe you are a fungi expert, I'd love to hear from you, either in the comments or maybe reach out via social media, or send me an email, jules@juleswyman.com, and let me know how much of an impact or the difference that that's made and how you use that. Maybe we can start a little thread of these different things that we've used that have made a difference in our lives. But thank you for joining me for today's episode. I am curious as to what you take away. So make sure you leave a message in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share the abundance. Share and show what it is that you have in your life and how magical that is, because by doing that, it helps other people see what they have too. I'll speak to you again soon.